Welcome to the season 19 of the Productized Podcast. I'm Pedro Ganço, and I'll be your host for today's episode. This season, we're all about create change together with Productized 2025, where we explore how product leaders, innovators, and change makers can drive real lasting impact across teams, industries, and communities. Today, we're going to have a conversation with Ben Maynard. Welcome to the show. Ben is a founder and CEO of Sheev, a UK-based consultancy specializing in agile transformation, product coaching, and organizational design. He has over a decade of experience. He focuses on helping organizations build effective customer-centric products and teams. At Sheev, Maynard emphasizes practical, human-central approaches to agile and product development. He's also certified in LAS. We will talk about a little bit about it in this podcast. He's a trainer certified over hundreds of practitioners across multiple countries. So I think we're really going into something in this podcast today. And beyond that, you probably also know Ben because of his Product Agility podcast, where he discusses topics related to agile coaching, product management. If you're into product, probably you should check it out on Spotify, and good luck trying to scroll all the way to the first episode. I did that and I gave up because it's a very long list already. He's a senior at it. So I think we're into a very good conversation today. Ben, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
It's lovely to be here. And thank you for such a lovely introduction. Yeah,
and I'm actually excited for it because I just started this podcast at Productized. Productized has over 100 episodes so far, but you're in it for quite some time, hadn't you?
I've been in it for a long time. Yeah, a really long time. It started off for me as a way to actually engage with a very specific community, which was around large-scale Scrum. And then after a year or so, I just thought actually the conversations I want to have are much broader than just kind of large-scale Scrum. And yeah, and for full transparency, I think my love of all things agile was definitely waning at that point. So I renamed the podcast Productized, and at that point, things had just built up a massive head of steam. So we're like almost 300 episodes probably over the last few years.
That's quite something, and I really wanted to dive into it. And before I go there, for anyone listening to us right now that they may not know, who is Ben? Aside my brief introduction, who is Ben? What you do? What you up to?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'll try and keep this short. So, and Pedro, do keep me on track with this here. But the route to where I am today was very non-standard and isn't probably what many people would expect. You know, I was homeless at the age of 17 and homeless a few times after that. I grew up in an environment where, to be honest with you, ethics were low and criminality was high. And my path, was never to probably be here doing this with you all. One of the last things I remember my dad saying to me before he died, which was, he honestly thought if I carried on the way I was going, that prison would have been the ultimate kind of location for me. That was my career aspiration. But through, I suppose, hard work and dedication and a lot of work on myself, I find myself here, having been in kind of software product development for, I'd say close to nearly 20 years now. Mm-hmm. In total, having held many kind of senior positions in many of the world's kind of best known investment banks, and now have my own kind of consultancy company and podcast where I get to help out loads of fantastic organizations looking at their organizational and product strategy, looking at the way that they are structured, the way that they operate, and all from a very strong kind of coaching and mentoring perspective. And I think my past, it taught me a lot about what it takes to survive, but what it also takes to motivate yourself and other people to try and kind of to really turn something around. So, I mentioned my path because it doesn't qualify me for this, but it does give me a few unique perspectives on all things kind of product and organizational.
It's a very rough start in someone's career. And I've been doing personal development myself. And just this last year alone, I discovered some ideas. And for instance, there's this psychiatrist, Carl Jung, that says we really need to embrace the shadow because it's part of us. We all have these traumas that we bring to the table. We all have different offsets, different starts. And you really mentioned some working on myself, which is kind of the key. We really need to go deep inside and understand where we're coming from, accept it, integrate, because that's still part of us. It will never go away. And if we do this process right, sometimes it's even a leverage that we can then use to uphold ourselves into a different change. So that's very interesting, you bringing this personal side of you.
Well, I never want to use it as a marketing ploy. That is never the intention, but I've found that by working hard and by, by challenging myself, that actually it makes me better at my job. And I also
totally
know that many, many people have been through many, many awful things in their life, throughout their life, and we don't feel like we can talk about it. And I think there is, without wanting to get like too kind of dark or emotional on it, I think that a topic which has affected me personally a couple of times, I think in the last year or so, is male suicide. And I think unless we can find ways to talk about our past and find ways to integrate it and deal with that, then awful things can happen. And if I can share these things and it helps one person go out and just reflect and try and do something about it, then it's been worth sharing it.
Most of the leaps of self-development I made, it was when someone like you were sharing that, like, I'm not alone. There's someone that is facing similar issues, specifically in being homeless. That was actually one of the experiences I had before. It was when I did some volunteering work, delivering food to homeless people in Lisbon. But the most insightful thing for me, it was like, there's zero difference between people serving, people receiving the food. It's just usually some small details that happen in your life. What I realized, it's very, very easy for someone to go from one situation to another. It may be like a cascading loss of job, not handling properly, or tough relationship with a loved one, or alcohol. There's always some kind of trigger, but goes into a very quick spiral loop. I met very interesting people that were exactly like me, but due to one or two facts in life, it turned out to be different.
Yeah. No, it's amazing, isn't it? But I mean, I know I don't. We digress, and anyone that listens to my podcast knows how much I just love talking about the things that are kind of very close to my heart. And and so like we don't have to labor this.
This is all about the product, but it's also about humans. So thanks for sharing a little bit of that side as well.
Yeah.
So today I have a very curiosity because I just started this Productized Podcast. Productized Podcast has been going for quite some time, but you've been it for a long time. It's very, very hard to scroll. So some questions that I'm really curious about it is, now you met a ton of interesting people working in product. Are there any things that you find they bring in common to the table? That's one of the questions. Another one is, what we still need to talk more about?
That's a really interesting question. And I would love to say that there's been a really strong theme that's come through that isn't obvious, but I think that's the case. I think actually there is, people are always at the very center of all the things that we are trying to do. And I think that the human element to every topic that's been on my podcast has always kind of come through really strongly. And we can't, cover over the fact that it's people that make the change. And it's how do we kind of bring people on that change journey, and how do we motivate people? I mean, that's always been very true. I think one of the things which is consistent when I think of all the guests we've had on, I think of all the topics we've had on, is actually that you can't shortcut things. There is no quick fix. And there have definitely been people that have come on the podcast who have had a silver bullet, or, dare I say, some kind of snake oil that they've tried to sell. I mean, they just don't exist. And I think that the one thing that has really astounded me about some of the top-notch guests, it's a very English thing to say that, top-notch meaning very good guests that we've had over the years, they've got it's the high degree of intelligence and thinking and humility that's made them successful. When I look back through all the episodes where people have done phenomenally well, it's always the ones where I can look at that guest and say, do you know what? I mean, they're incredibly intelligent. They've put a shitload of thinking into their topic, into the thing they're talking about. They've gone off and they've practiced it and they've made it real. And that authenticity comes through. And I think that there have been many, many people, not so much in the product world, but particularly in the Agile world over the last 10 years or so, who have been pushing things which have not been tested or tried, and they haven't had deep experience in. And I think that always those types of people get found out in the end. So I think, yes, it's just from the guest perspective, it's that intelligence, the authenticity, and the real world experience which really makes a difference.
That's really great. So it's not one that comes with this is the 5 things you need to do to rock the show. It's like people that are sometimes more uncertain. They have ideas. They understand.
Yeah. And they're honest and they're willing to explore. And I think that's really, really important. But there is no silver bullet. And I think a lot of the topics which I would have loved to have gotten into on the podcast, I think they're yet to come. I think actually, the last few weeks have seen me do lots of solo episodes. And what I'm finding is that those episodes actually are getting probably better traction than some of the guest episodes we've had on in the past. And I think there's some more interesting avenues to go into that I haven't found the right guests to speak to about.
I actually checked that one of the solo podcasts I've been listening to on you, it was like, this is how I started. I kind of missed this. So one of actual things I wanted to know is, what is your favorite format? Like, do you prefer, sometimes I need to flesh ideas out solo podcasts. I like one-to-one interviews or group interviews. How the dynamic changes.
If I was to put it in order, and this is maybe a little bit egotistical, I love doing the solo episodes, because then I can just really go deep on something that I'm really, really passionate about. I have to tune into the guest. I have to think about the next question. I can just, ad-lib it. I always have a rough idea of what I'm going to talk about, and the rest of it comes from my heart. And I love that format. So I love the solo episodes. Close second to that is actually the episodes that I do with Productized live from the conference. When we set up our little studio at the Productized conference and we have all these amazing speakers coming. I love that. I think for me, there's a dynamism. They're short episodes. We have great people. You never know what's going to come up. I've never met 90% of the people that I'm speaking to, and I love that. I love that sense of the unknown. And then third to that is then maybe the interviews. And the interviews are great. Don't get me wrong. They are great quality interviews and I enjoy doing them. But with the interviews comes a certain level of pressure and preparation. And if there's one thing that I don't really like is preparation with these things.
For the randomness of things.
I like things to be a little bit random and a little bit unpredictable, let's say.
Let's try to do it this way in this conversation. I have a ton of questions, but I still haven't looked at them yet because I like also to try this conversational mode. And you know what? It resonates. I listened to the podcast where you are going solo, and it feels like you have the urge to share. Like,
yeah,
you know what? I started this. I want to talk. Sorry about it. And then and it's fluid. It's not someone following a script. It really comes from the heart, and you can tell that.
Yeah. I mean, when I was younger, I never spoke loudly. I never really spoke to anyone. I was very shy. And there got to a point in my life where when I started university and we had a mentor come in from one of the more senior kind of people from our course. I was in the first year, he was in the fourth year, and they were to teach us like speaking skills. And he came up and and this is wrong of me, but I just instantly disliked him. And so when he said, who would like to come and give a 5-minute talk on a topic yet to be decided? And I was like, do you know what? Because he was like, and you won't be able to do it. It'd be really hard. And I'd be like, I can do that. I'll do that. And so then I went up there and he chose a whiteboard pen. And I spoke for like 10 minutes about the whiteboard pen just to prove him wrong. And at that point, it was a turning point for me because I realized that actually if there's something that I'm passionate about, even if it's with the wrong motivations, I can talk. And I can talk and talk and talk. And so that's kind of the great thing, I think, is that when you have a podcast, is that you do get opportunity to pick a topic that you're incredibly passionate about and just really share how you feel about it. So yeah,
how old were you?
At that point, I started university quite late, I think, in the grand scheme of things. So I would have been probably like 21, 22.
It seems like you felt an imprint, like that story you just shared. It felt like it created some identity in you because it did. You can resonate like you're a good speaker. You like to speak.
It was the first time I probably really felt like I had any real self-belief in my life.
And then, that I can tell also that it feels like there's an imprint in that story that you start resonating. I can do this. I can be a speaker.
I would say
inspired, educational,
overwhelming, very practical,
challenging,
thought-provoking,
meaningful,
enthusiastic,
nice people,
innovation, and fun.
Product growth mindset.
new connections.
Join us at the coolest product management environment this October in Lisbon.
And when did you start the podcast and what was the trigger? Do you still remember the moment like, yeah, I'm going to do it and let's see?
I hit like close to middle age, right? And I got to 40 years old and just thought, running the business and the business was doing okay, but there was a quiet patch. I thought, you know what? I've always loved the idea of editing audio. And I really knew that when it came to large scale Scrum, which is where the podcast started, I knew that I wanted to kind of raise awareness of it. So I thought, why don't I just bring that together? But when I interview some of the trainers from large scale Scrum, I can learn how to edit audio and then I can just put it out there and see how it goes. And so that was one element because I thought I needed a hobby. The other part of it was, and again, like maybe oversharing here a little bit, but my dad died when I was 17, and I've got no real evidence of my father ever being alive. I can't remember how he spoke. I've got very little video of him. He's a really distant, vague memory now, and that makes me very sad. And my dad died when he was 51, which is 6 years away from my age now. And I just thought when I hit 40, do you know what? If I do die, and let's be honest, we're all going to die at some point, I want my boys to be able to learn about me and know who their dad was, and not just who was turning up and cooking dinner and making breakfast, but actually what he did. And so some of it was about legacy, about giving my kids an opportunity to get to know their dad when I'm not around.
You just made me shiver now, because I totally resonate with what you just said. This month I'm doing this podcast as a volunteer. I work only part-time, and a few weeks ago, actually, my wife told me, you spend so much time in this volunteering you do. And I actually said to her, if I die today, this has now some digital footprint on me on YouTube. She can listen to that because she's 2 years old. She will not have many memories. So I got shivers just from what you just shared because I totally resonate with that.
That's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm glad right now. You made me feel good because I'm glad I'm not the only one who's had that thought.
Here we come again. That's why it's good to share. People resonate and probably get inspired to just leave some kind of digital footprints for the upcoming generations. This is a very short life we have on Earth. And now going into why agility, because when I was checking your profile, you have a lot of background on the bank industry.
Yes,
you have these
too much
typical classical industries where agility is not what one thinks first when it comes to banking industry. So why agility?
Why agility? Do you know what? When I started my career in banking as a temp, I quickly went from being a temp working operations to being a business analyst, as we were called then, although it's more familiar to maybe what some people would call a product owner in large banks nowadays. And what I found was that the process of writing large documents, which then got handed over to a team that I never met, who would then give me back something which was nothing like at all what people had envisioned, I just thought this is making me stressed out. And I feel like I'm doing a bad job. And I don't want my job just to be having written a document which gives me the option to have nothing to do with the output or the outcome. The goal was write a document, make it bulletproof, dissolve all responsibility, get someone to sign off, and you're done. And I thought, this is shit. This is not the way to go about doing things. So as my career progressed and I got the opportunity to work within a dev team, that's when everything I knew about Agile, I began to think, okay, this makes much more sense to me. And so then it was actually, I joined this team, and then within 12 months of joining this team and just helping out, I was given the opportunity to create my own organization within the bank, which wasn't bad considering I'd been
it's good that you can change internally.
Yeah.
An organization.
Yeah. So it was just, and what we'd proven was that actually talking to our customers, talking to our users, understanding where they were coming from, working in short iterations and getting the feedback and doing something about it was really useful. What we found out was actually bringing all the necessary roles together into small teams was really effective. And actually focusing on certain levels of technical excellence was also really effective. And what we found is that we were able to make a little pocket in a very, very large bank that was doing some interesting stuff. And so as a consequence, I was then asked if I wanted to have a bigger impact in the organization, and then we did the same and scaled up to about 6 or 7 teams. But we couldn't do things in the way that the bank wanted us to do things. We had to do things in a very independent way. We had to be rebels, and we kind of lived by the motto that we would rather try something and apologize than ask us for permission.
It's a totally mindset shift. And there's a ton of consultancy companies out there selling Agile transformation and kind of people, I know I have to have Agile in my organization, but then some consultants go in, sometimes they find these hard walls. On your experience, what is the most difficult thing in this transition from a non-Agile world to start implementing Agile practices?
I think if I think about when it's worked, and this may sound contrived, but we've had leaders that understood it and believed in it. and didn't want just to kind of do Agile or be 100% Agile or anything else. Agile was just something which worked really well at the team level. And they believed in it, and then and we wanted to create the right space for the teams. And it was those enlightened leaders who had the right language, had the right mindset, the enlightened leaders who were willing to get rid, if I'm honest with you, fire people or move people on at that senior level who weren't engaged in the change in the right way, who wouldn't change their behaviors. Like, that's when it worked. When it didn't work is when the leaders, the more senior people in the organization, were saying we need to change and do this, we need to go into agile transformation. And I think this is that brick wall that peer consultants hit, is because the leaders want everyone else to change their behaviors but don't think they have to change their own.
Okay, you should change to Agile. You guys below me.
Yeah, but even with any of it, for example, there's a shift to more kind of impact rather than just output. Sure, a leader can say to the teams, go ahead and we want you to do all of this. We want to focus on impact. We want you to deliver outcomes. All that's fantastic. But if that leader's going to turn around and then just give people, say, well, but can you just create this for me? Or can you create that to me? Or isn't going to let them succeed and fail? Or isn't going to find ways to remove the barriers between the team and the customers, or the teams and the users, then you're never going to get very far. And I think that's where a lot of the consultancies end up having a really mediocre impact. It's because the best you can do is they go on and they paint a framework over what's already there, and there's no real change for people. It's probably just more meetings, and it's just theatre. And that's kind of the reason why I've really over time moved away from Agile, because I think that it ended up becoming something which is more of a commercial product, which has been commoditized rather than anything else. And I think what we're seeing now is many organizations realizing that they can get good training, and honestly, lots of teams already know it. You can get good training, get good resources online, and Agile can be something that you can explicitly choose to do or not. The real impact comes when actually you look at how do you shift your whole organization to focusing on something that's more purposeful. And how do you get the impact you need from kind of shifting the organization rather than just saying, let's go and do Agile?
Yeah, it needs to come from true intent, from top down. I really want to change and commit, including myself. This actually, I just talked with Bruce McCarthy the other day, and he gave the exact same question, like from sales-led organizations to product-led. It needs to be like truth coming from the top down, really wanting to change.
Yeah.
Actually, I have this experience in one company, a typical sales-led company. They hired a new leader and said, we're going to do SAFe. And it was exactly like you described.
Okay.
We're going to do, let's print frameworks. Now everyone's going to work in a different way, but everyone in the management team behaves exactly like before. And guess what? Didn't turn out well.
No, it doesn't turn out well. And I'm kind of done with a lot of the Agile stuff. It's just because it's just like there's absolute value in it. Honestly, that absolutely is. But it's just become synonymous with so many bad things now, and synonymous with SAFe, and SAFe kind of really ruined things for everybody, apart from the VC funders or the kind of the people that had equity. It kind of ruined it for everyone else. But what you're saying about starting from the top, I think it's a really obvious thing to say, and I don't think people really talk about practically how does that manifest. And if I think of one leader I've been working with recently, he is for me the shining light of what it should be, because he joined an organization and he had a different language, he had a different terminology, and he made it really, really clear that that's what he expects people to do. He didn't micromanage, he didn't tell people what to do. He just made it very, very clear what he expected of everyone. And he did not stop making that point, and has not stopped making that point. And then what we found was after 2 or 3 months, everyone started to talk differently. Everyone started to open their minds. And it sounds so silly. You can do so many shitty workshops, when people come in, let's go. We'll start with whys. So we'll get loads of Post-its up and we'll just figure out our why. You're not going to figure out your why. Like, if people it takes more than just a workshop to make a difference. It takes consistent change to language and behaviors at a senior level, and a lack of acceptance of anything but that to really initiate meaningful organizational change, that you're not having to pay a consultancy to come in and manage for you. I'm successful in what I do because I don't go in with a horde of other people. I go in and I earn respect and I earn hearts and minds. And we make a difference because we empower everyone else to make the change, not because we are implementing some kind of centralized change program.
What do you feel is the most difference between these companies that seem to get it and those that don't? When do you see people driving towards like the same goal and they are all aligned? What are the main differentiators? Imagining someone maybe listening to us, a founder or someone in a management position in a company and saying, yeah, I feel what Ben is saying. I kind of feel that sometimes we are just lagging or like building a feature factory without kind of purpose behind it. What do you feel is the main difference between these companies that get it and those that don't?
It's an excellent question. And I think for me, the major delineator has always been when you're in companies that get it, there's like less method and more meaning. And I don't think it needs to get any more complicated than that. Because if you take a real world example, you have a startup. It's the meaning is just in everything that you do, that purpose, that desire, that will. You know, you're working with a founder or you are the founder. Everyone knows that you're making a difference. You haven't got a lot of money. You haven't got a lot of time, right? But you have got a shitload of motivation and real meaning and purpose to what you're doing. And that motivates everyone towards a very few but impactful goals and proliferates learning throughout the organization. When your organization then begins to get bigger, you're almost inclined to then try and recruit people who have worked in bigger organizations so that you can help deal with the getting bigger. But all that does is just they end up doing what they've always done in some way and thinking that that's what you have to do in order to succeed. So many organizations I've been in, particularly startups, they've hired so many people and put so much method in place, they lose all meaning. And it just ends up being just as shit as the big, slow organizations that they never thought they would be. I remember there's one organization I worked with who I loved. I really loved them as a group. I remember going to speak to their testing team and saying, like, why have you not embraced automated testing? Like, I don't. He said, look, the difference is, Ben, so we're a startup. We haven't got the money to invest in automated testing. We haven't got the money to do that. And I was like, I found it fascinating. Because you know what? For the last 10 years working in banking, the excuse that everyone used was that they couldn't do it. They couldn't embrace automated testing because they weren't a startup. And now I've got startups telling me they can't embrace automated testing because they're not a big bank. I don't think the issue is your size or the funding. I think it's your mindset and your skill set and being able to get over yourself. Because they couldn't in any way tie the automated testing to the purpose of the company, because that purpose of the company had been diluted. So yeah, for me, it's about less method and more meaning.
And how can a company align so many different folks and different heads around the same purpose? How can come up with some kind of strategy? Sometimes this leaves solo in some founder's mind. Sometimes this purpose is spread across different people. How can we help companies create the change towards being aligned in the same purpose?
Yeah, I think that we need to appreciate that, you know, complexity is it's both a symptom and a cause. Okay, so then when things get more complex and we can't understand them and no one really knows what's going on, then we know that we lost that meaning. So how do we then tie people to it? Is if you look at what the software engineering teams, what software development teams are doing, if they can't tie back the thing that they're writing to a real meaningful customer impact, if they don't know the difference they're making to the organization, then we need to find a way to remove the waste and the ambiguity between them and the purpose. Now, why do I choose the software engineering and development teams and not say like middle management or something else? Is because when you're thinking of that overall flow of value, let's go right to the end. Because if we can start at the end and work backwards, then we can begin to solve it all the way through. If we start at middle management or we start somewhere else and we say, oh, great, you know, we need to make sure that all teams are aligned to purpose and that all work aligns to an objective or an OKR or something like that, then generally speaking, what managers will do is that they'll put some new kind of structure in place in Jira or whatever tool it is you're using, rather than trying to make a structural difference. So I think what we need is, and this is not anything new, is that we need real teams that have the skills necessary to deliver real outcome. We need those teams to be small. We need them to be in a group of other teams that are all working towards a similar goal in the same context. And we need managers to be finding ways to remove the barriers that let the customer and the user lead the development.
it also comes down with a ton of repetition, isn't it? Because you just gave an example before that I found interesting. Someone repeating over and over kind of the same message. Because I totally understand what you said. And I've been in companies where this probably was the main differentiator, where people were struggling towards some kind of common goal for a specific period of time. But there was a need for someone like on a Monday weekly meeting. This is what you're doing. This is like the higher purpose. How do you feel about it? Do you feel that's needed, that we are keep
Yeah.
restating?
I think in the early days it is, and it needs to become part of what everyone does. I mean, one of the big things we've been doing recently, I mean, unless we would have called this moving towards a broad product model. In other language, you call it value streams. There's a whole different collection of labels you can use for this. But what we found is that there were lots of very disparate teams who you could have gone in every Monday and said, this is why you exist, but you're just talking to that one team. The moment we coalesce those teams with like teams who are all working towards a broader, higher goal, actually what we find is that we can make sure that higher goal is really, really clear. We can make sure that they've got the right relationships so that they can go and talk to the right people. And that actually repetition doesn't need to happen for too long before they start repeating it to you.
That's when probably is the metric of success.
I mean, there was a situation we were in back in March. I think it would have been March time, where there was a team who had been trying to achieve something for a long time. And then they joined part of this value stream, not a safe value stream, by the way, but something that's actually good. And they joined this value stream. And it was fascinating because we started the day with talking about the customers and the customer meetings and what the customers want and what the customers need, and hammered all of that. And then when the teams were then sent off to say, okay, go and figure out what your OKR is going to be for the next 3 months. And we checked in after an hour, and one team came back and was like, we can't see any way the work we're doing is contributing towards anything impactful, so we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. And actually what we're suggesting is we need to go back to the drawing board, and we need other people's help so that we can figure out how in the next quarter we can have a meaningful impact. A month and a half later, they've knocked it out the park. The thing which took them 4.5 months to not get to where they wanted it to be, they turned around in a month and a half. Not because they were injected with new skills or because a new consultancy came in, but because they were there to drive to make sure they were having an impact. And they were the right people for the job. They just needed the context to care. And I think that's one of the big things, which we think about less method and more meaning, and what do we need to do. That the higher thing here is, how do we collectively create the context so that people can care? And I think that's the one thing that often gets missed.
And you get it right when that person starts pushing back at you. It actually happened to me a few times when I was a product manager, and most of the work as product manager, I sell narratives. I tell these stories, what we're doing. And it's funny that you said that, because there was this one time that the developer actually pushed back on me, like, no, this doesn't even, and I'm like, good for the pushback.
Yeah.
Let me back on track on the main goal.
No, but it's really fascinating, because I think there is so much in organizations where, as product managers, particularly product managers, organizations evolve. We end up being too far down in the weeds, in the detail. And the organization's growing and growing, and there's more and more teams coming on, and we're having more and more work to do, but we can't be involved in all the clarification. So actually, we need to find ways to help other people make the decisions for us and tell us their intent, so we can help guide them. So our role becomes less about clarification and more about direction. And I don't think it's something that often, whether it's product manager or any other role, I don't think we realize that that's a key part of our leadership in a growing organization or a complex organization, is how do we give the people who are dependent upon us the skills necessary to be more self-sufficient, so that we can then elevate ourselves to be new and better leaders. And I think that's another great way to help remove some of that complexity, is to push the decision-making down as far as possible and make sure they're empowered to make those decisions. And when you've got developers coming back to you saying, that is not the most valuable thing we can do.
That's a very good moment.
And then you can just kick back.
Go
get yourself a cup of tea.
You've done something right before.
Exactly.
I hope people do understand the importance of this insight that you just shared. One may think that when talking to someone with that in the scope of Agile, it's more about methods and process, but you really turn it all around. It's all mostly about purpose. There was actually this one book from a guy named Victor, I forget the last name, The Man's Search for Purpose or something like that. He actually studied people facing the Auschwitz during these Nazi times, and he understood that were people that facing the most horrible things one can not even imagine, there were some people that find ways to go on, face all the adversity. And when he interviewed these people, these psychiatrists, he understood that it was people that had some purpose. I want to one day get out of here because my kids, because I want to tell the story, because that was a common purpose. And what it has been discovered is that when you know the purpose, when you know why you're doing the things you're doing, you can endure all the adversity in the world. So this is actually very, very, very important, insightful for companies. We can translate this to companies.
It is, and to go from Auschwitz to like product development, it's a hard. I feel almost like wrong doing it, but I think that you raise a very good point. Purpose and meaning is incredibly important to us as humans, and I think that Agile lost its way when it became a commodity. And when you go back to the original forefathers of Agile and what was intended, it was nothing to what it turned into.
People over processes, working software over documentation.
Exactly. And there was a classic line, business people and developers should work together on a daily basis. And I think that that's been so misconstrued and so misunderstood and so overlooked that actually Agile lost all of its connection to meaning and purpose. And I think now that is the case. And I don't think it will ever not be the case until long before I'm dead and buried. I think that the opportunity that we're faced with here is how do we as product and tech work together? How do we accept that there is actually lots of really awesome shit that is part of Agile, but that alone is not enough? And how can we as product people, as leaders, inject meaning and purpose and create those contexts to care so that Agile can flourish and be useful and not be the horrible industrial complex it became?
I love it. I don't have anything else to add on what you just said, Ben. I love it. Let me shift gears now towards the future. AI is just coming. Just the other day, 2 days ago, a friend of mine told me, "Hey, Pedro, let's hop on a call. I want to show you something." And he was like putting his cursor on the desktop and showing me 2 agent AIs working for him. He's a developer, and he just said, this is what I want to achieve. You are a product owner. You need to break down this problem into steps, and immediately boom, 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 boom. It's like, would be probably 3 days of work of mine, structuring all these things and breaking down the problem and missions and persons and targets and whatever. And it's like, boom. And then he said to another agent AI, now you are a developer and you work for this agent AI that is a product owner, and boom, 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 started coding. And he was like just orchestrating 2 agent AIs. One playing the role of a product manager, another one playing his own role of a developer. That's like, I can't even catch up to the speed of how things are going. How do you see this unfolding? AI, Agile, product.
It's interesting because I spent 2 days this week in a strategy workshop with a client. And if anyone from the client's listening, hello, I won't give anything away, don't worry. But obviously, there was lots of conversations around AI. And it's interesting you mentioned about agents, because there was conversations around agents. And I think what we see is really could be a really fascinating turn of events, is that your friend made a product owner agent and a developer agent. And then why isn't there an agent who's just having them talk so he doesn't have to do anything at all? It's when you begin to get this agent to agent direct conversation. I think that I think AI is wonderful. And I think that if you're scared of it, then get over it, because it's here to stay. And like with any change, and I built my career on this, when change is happening, you just become the expert in it. If you don't become the expert in it, you'll end up having a very hard career choice at some point. You become the expert in it, you become invaluable. And my career is built on that.
It's ingrained in your identity as an Agile guy. Agile is all about that.
Yeah. Well, but then again, but also to that point, that's how I had to find ways to survive when I was younger. If I wasn't moving forward, if I wasn't making the most of every situation, then I couldn't afford any food, or I couldn't afford any clothes, or I couldn't afford to pay the bills. The difference is now is I don't do it via criminal means. I do it via legal means.
Yeah, digital business behind it.
Yeah, and I don't think I can get arrested for anything I did back then. So I don't think there's any evidence. And the
So
stuff.
it's already
And when
prescribed.
I did get arrested, it's fine. Because I never ended up in prison. Just
Yeah,
with maybe
exactly.
a small criminal record.
And that's actually the difference between lean and agile, isn't it? Lean is all about removing waste and being fluid, but then comes agile and said, no, we need to adapt with change. Change is
Yes. And
good, so let's work with change.
And let's use those both together. Let's focus on doing just enough work to get the most learning out of any situation. So when I think of the future for AI, I think that we need to embrace it and we need to find ways to have it elevate us by saving us time. So I always say I used to spend 5 or 6 hours trying to get something to like an 8 out of 10. So say a 5 out of 10. Now I can spend 5 minutes getting it to a 5 out of 10. And I can spend 2 hours making it to an 8 out of 10. I never produced 8 out of 10 work. It was always 5 out of 10 work. But now I produce 8 out of 10 work in less time.
I love it.
Not because AI is doing it for me, but because AI is doing all the stuff that takes me as a human a long time to do, because I have to physically type stuff. And it just does that stuff for me. So I think that's really interesting.
You still need to go from A to B. You just rather choose a car instead of walking.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just get over the fact that like I am not perfect. And I have a lot to learn. And I use AI as my teacher. One of the guests we had on the podcast a number of years ago was a guy called Dom Heinrich. And he's now works at Coca-Cola. I think he drives Coca-Cola's AI strategy. Mm-hmm. He's a wonderful guy. And we totally agreed that AI is only limited by the stupidity of humans. Because we never know that we haven't got good questions to ask it. We've always got really mediocre questions to ask it. So if you were faced with an expert, if you were faced with Albert Einstein, and and I said to you, right, ask Albert Einstein your best possible question about the theory of relativity. My best possible question about the theory of relativity would be, what is the theory of relativity? All right? I fucking don't know where to start. If I was an expert in it, I would ask a much better question. I'd get a much better response. So how can we use AI to teach us to be better at what we do so we can ask it better questions?
I love that. That's another insight I'll take away from this conversation.
Yeah.
And I totally understand that. I was in this one company doing some consultancy work, and then I stopped for a while. When I got back 2 years later, I knew the challenge I was going to accept. But then, first week of job, I was like, oh, the CTO just did half the things I was going to do, just because he knows how to ask the proper questions to AI. And that's exactly it. Almost half the work is done. So let me then focus on the things that I feel still some loopholes on it.
I think there's a lot to be said for actually AI can help us act quicker as well. But there is one interesting area, and I don't think there's a lot written up about it yet. Mm-hmm. But I suspect that maybe in the next 2 or 3 years, maybe sooner, I do wonder that if we're going to be hearing people talk about agent-led growth. So product-led growth has been a big thing. Actually, and it's done wonders for the world. But what if we can achieve agent-led growth?
It's a very interesting idea. Back to the developer I was just talking to 2 days ago. He was actually worrying already about something that he's building all this agent architecture of his own, trying to teach the agent as much as possible and fine-tune the agent to work as he wanted to. And he was already thinking, I can now store all these prompts, all these ideas I shared, and this is my architecture. I can then combine with my other friends. I can move this away from when I go to another company. This is my property architecture. So he's already thinking about optimizing his own work. And what he just said is like, as a company, as an organization, how can we optimize this flow between agents and...
how can we use agents to drive our growth? How can we have agent-to-agent transactions and agent-to-agent discovery?
There's this prediction that one day we're going to work side by side alongside with agents. Like we are both on the room with an agent AI that understands us and is get delivered some tasks to do. Is actually giving us some tasks to do. And you need to be able to understand and cooperate with the machine. That was Anthropic I think it was Anthropic that just created recently something called MCP. They're already trying to lay out the protocols of communication between agents. So I think that's a short-term prediction you just made. Probably it's just a 5 years thing, or
but it's I think for those, I think there's a huge amount of opportunity, and I think that organizations that aren't actively beginning to experiment with this to build their own internal AI capabilities, their own understanding, I think that they will, they will get left behind. They'll get left behind because their competitors will, or they'll get left behind because an upstart will come and just to totally challenge their market position. So I think we are in a really, really exciting period of increased human productivity and increased human success with our partnership with agents and AI tools generally.
Adapt or die, like the old guy would say.
Exactly.
It's just another evolution around the corner.
It is.
Ben, I feel that I just could talk with you forever. I haven't looked at the script. I have a ton of questions I could ask to you, but I haven't looked at it because it's so good to have this conversation with you. And we're just wrapping up the 1 hour of this podcast. But I don't want to go before asking you, probably connecting both these two topics we mentioned, the change of Agile, the need for purpose and meaning in teams. How can I'm a startup guy in a small organization. I feel as a product manager contributor, I can steer direction. How can I mix these two concepts together? Meaning, is there any frameworks we can use to share these visions and kind of like blend all together, implement Agile, sharing the vision? What's your take? Because you have lots of experience in coaching teams and companies in going forward.
Yeah.
Any last advice for small companies listening to us?
Yeah, I would say that number one, feel free to contact me because I have a process, a playbook for these types of things. And I'm always more than happy to share bits of that, to people free of charge. So feel free to contact me. And for me, what I can say is that there's a proliferation of canvases out there, right? And canvases are the shit, right? I think I did an episode on canvases on the podcast and say, actually, canvases have absolutely got a place. But if you expect to go in a room and fill in a canvas and have it solve your problems, then you're wrong. You're so wrong. A canvas and post-it notes and dot voting and all this stuff, it can be really useful if you do it well. And doing it well isn't turning up unprepared, right? So I think that things like radical product thinking, phenomenal, right? The radical product vision, excellent. And I would say that if you are feeling that people are losing the meaning, right, or you're losing touch with your meaning, then go to radicalproductthinking.com. You can download the toolkit. From there, you'll kind of be guided through it, and also buy the book. It's a very good book. And have a go at filling in a radical product thinking template, because that is a lovely way of challenging your thinking and breaking stuff down, because I think there's a lot of value then in what you end up with. And actually, whilst you are then filling in that, you're putting lots of thinking in, and that shouldn't be the only way that you communicate where you want to go, but it will help you tune into why you started the company and why you made a difference, and then allow you to engage other people on that as well. And I think that's really important, because once you start with that vision, once you understand where it is you want to go, then you can begin to do things like assess your business model. Then you can begin to do things like assess your strategy. Then you can begin to do things like understand the way that you're trying to attain your goals actually enable you to execute upon that strategy. Yeah, and then we can begin to look at discovery and feedback loops. But it all starts with really understanding what problem are you really solving, and really how are you trying to make lives better. And I think for me, that's always the starting point.
I love that. I also feel the same bipolar thing with Canvas, which is early in my career, they were crucial because it gave me some kind of easy understanding about this problem space, solution space, for priorities, Canvas for priorities, Canvas for business plans. All these Canvas helped me structure my thinking. But at some point, I also turned in what you just said, like, this is bullshit. We're just putting post-its for the sake of post-its. I think I don't know where I'm at the moment. I mean, it's going from one side to the other, very extreme. I love Canvas. I hate Canvas.
Mate, but I think canvases, the issue with canvases is that for many consultancies, it provided an illusion of competency, which is different than competent people using canvases.
Well, that's a good statement. You should put it on a quote.
Yeah,
Ben Maynard.
That's
a very good statement, because I reckon that I worked in consultancy, and we always struggle to put something on a quadrant. If you put something on a 2-axis, we feel smart. We feel like we are looking at something under two main variables.
But then I think the more mature of us and the more humble of us then look at ourselves after using this game. Yeah, I was a complete canvasaholic for many years and was always just like, oh God, yeah, these are amazing. And I was like, actually, maybe they're not, because like nothing really meaningful is happening afterwards. It's actually then reflecting on saying, okay, right, well, like, why are they not having an impact?
Mhm.
Maybe it isn't not using canvases, but maybe it's how do I make those moments when we have people together and we're taking them through that structured thinking, how do we make that more effective? And for me, there was one book I read recently. It's been on my reading list for too long, and I finally got around to reading it about a year and a half ago, which for me was the missing piece of the jigsaw when it came to certain canvases, which was I've got it here, which was Playing to Win.
I didn't know that one.
Playing to Win, it was phenomenal. And what I found is the more that I've taken inspiration and advice from that book, the more effective I've been and the more successful I've been. Because it forces you to cut through the fluff and the bullshit. And it forces you to actually think about the stuff you're trying to put onto what is effectively template-driven consultancy.
Yeah, I love that. And I really check on that book. I don't know about it. And just another comment before probably we wrap up. You mentioned Radhika Dutt. Radhika Dutt is also very friendly, close figure we have at Productize. She's coming also to the Productize conference this year. I have it here open, the framework you mentioned. And it is super simple. And sometimes the simpler it is, the better you go straight to purpose, like you were mentioning early this episode. The structure is like today when some user segment want to some outcome, they have to, this is the current solution they use. This is unacceptable because this is the shortcomings. We envision a world where these shortcomings are solved, and we're bringing this world about through, and this is our approach. I actually made this myself when I was in a workshop with Radhika, and I loved these single words. She said, this is unacceptable because, and I was like, this needs to be this word alone brings a lot of meaning. We're not just pushing some new feature on a product. No, this is unacceptable. The current solution is unacceptable. And this is how we're going to tackle. This brings a lot of meaning and vision to
It's an amazing inflection point for me that this is unacceptable because, it's in the same way that if people come up with a solution, you say, okay, great, so you've got an idea for something, wonderful, but actually you say, but you want to change something, but what was the original thing designed to actually do? And why is that now unacceptable? And people are always like, don't know, actually. It's like, well, maybe let's start there. Let's try and figure out, wait, what's so unacceptable about what's happening now? And why is that unacceptable? And what was it designed to do? Then we can begin to see actually, let's take it from that point. But I think, yeah, you're right. Radical Product Thinking is a wonderful toolkit. It's a wonderful book. Radhika's one of the best humans I've ever met. And of course, yeah, we will be all together at the Productized conference in October, which I'm very much looking forward to.
Looking forward to see you in real person end of this year. And before I wrap up, Ben, let's take a moment to reflect on this conversation. The key insights that I got from you. So it's not about processes and whatever Agile already filled up the room. It's about giving some kind of purpose. It's not spreading canvas. It's like knowing what you're doing. You also mentioned small teams to be a main factor. Any other takeaways that you want people to take out of this conversation?
I think it's just it's this idea of like less method, more meaning, and I think that's as true in organizations as it is to ourselves. And so I think that when you're looking at self-help books, or you're watching videos on YouTube, or you're trying to find a way to fix something, professional or personal, don't get hung up in the method.
Thank you so much, Ben, for sharing all these valuable insights on creating change together. Before you go, do you have any upcoming projects, initiatives you want to share? Or can people reach out to you?
Do you know what? We'll continue to do the podcast. It will be at Productized, recording episodes live there. But as into stuff that's going to come out, there'll be a Substack at some point in the foreseeable future. But I am just very, very busy helping product companies be better product companies at the moment. So I haven't been that vocal out in the world. But I do have lots of stuff that I can share. So if anybody is interested and they're not seeing anything coming out from me, I'm not very proactive about it, then do feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and just ask me a question, because I'm always more than happy to help.
Thank you so much, Ben, for your time. For everyone tuning in, don't forget to also follow Productize, LinkedIn, subscribe to this podcast, and leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for listening. Remember, change is something we can all create together. See you in the next episode. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you.